Imagine you're aboard a ship caught in a storm. Waves rise like mountains, winds scream through the sails, and the crew panics, desperately looking for someone to take the helm. But instead of the experienced navigator or the seasoned captain, it's the loudest, most confident man, the one with no knowledge of the stars, no sense of the sea, who grabs the wheel, and everyone lets him. Why? Why do the least qualified people seem to succeed, especially in times when we need real wisdom the most? Why do we so often find ourselves led by those who speak the loudest, promise the most, and understand the least? This isn't just a modern problem, it's an ancient one. Over 2,000 years ago, Plato saw this coming. In the Republic, he described a disturbing paradox, that in a democratic society, people would eventually stop valuing truth and competence, and instead become obsessed with charm, popularity, and spectacle. Leadership would become a game, not of virtue, but of persuasion. And those least fit to lead would be the ones we follow most blindly. He called it the ship of state metaphor. In it, a ship represents society. The owner of the ship is strong but a bit deaf and short-sighted, the people. The sailors are quarrelsome and each one believes they deserve to steer the ship, though none of them truly understand navigation, the politicians and influencers. Meanwhile, the true navigator, the philosopher, the one who knows the stars, the tides, the way, is dismissed, mocked, or ignored altogether. It's an image that cuts to the bone. Because we've all seen this happen, in politics, business, even in our social lives. Those with the deepest insight often sit quietly in the corner, while those with the flashiest rhetoric command the room. We reward charisma over competence, confidence over character. And it begs the question, are we drawn to the wrong kinds of leaders, or are we simply afraid of the right ones? Plato believed that true leadership required something rare and difficult, philosophical wisdom, a love of truth, a deep, disciplined understanding of justice, of the human soul, of the nature of power and its dangers. But here's the catch. Those who possess this wisdom, he warned, are the least likely to want to rule. Why? Because the philosopher has tasted a different kind of life. One of inner order, of reflection, of wrestling with uncomfortable truths. They are repelled by the madness of the political world. In Plato's words, the punishment for not wanting to be involved in politics is being governed by someone inferior to yourself. So the paradox emerges. Those most qualified to lead are least willing to take power, and those most eager for power are usually the ones who shouldn't be trusted with it, and yet we choose them, again and again. We choose the showman over the thinker, the confident over the competent, the person who mirrors our desires rather than challenges them. Because real leadership, the kind Plato spoke of, is rarely attractive. It's quiet, it's slow, it demands introspection and uncomfortable truths. And most people don't want that. We don't want to be led. We want to be flattered. We want someone to promise us simplicity in a complicated world. Someone to tell us that we're right, that we're good, that we don't have to change, even if it's a lie. So we hand the wheel of the ship to the one who yells the loudest. But here's the deeper tragedy. We confuse attention with authority. In the age of social media, virality often equals credibility. A person with 1 million followers is assumed to have something important to say. But popularity is not a measure of wisdom. It never was. And yet, we listen, not because the voice is true, but because it's loud. In this way, we create a culture that punishes humility and rewards spectacle. The thoughtful are seen as indecisive. The reflective are seen as weak. But Plato argued that true leadership requires soul order, an inner harmony where reason governs, spirit supports, and desire obeys. The philosopher king is not just a ruler, but a person who has learned to rule themselves. And that kind of person is rare. Because self-mastery is hard. It demands a confrontation with your own ignorance, your own darkness. And in a society addicted to speed, distraction, and external validation, who has time for that? So instead we elevate those who seem strong even when they are hollow. Those who project certainty even if it's built on sand. But here's the real danger. When the unqualified rise to power, they don't just lead badly, they shape the soul of the society. A fish rots from the head down. The leader becomes a mirror of what we value. If we value wealth above wisdom, we'll get greedy leaders. If we value charisma over competence, we'll get narcissists. If we value noise over nuance, we'll be ruled by the loud and the shallow. And yet, we long for something more. You can feel it, in the quiet dissatisfaction, in the erosion of trust, in the creeping sense that something is broken, that the people who are supposed to guide us don't know where they're going, that we're drifting, and beneath that, a deeper ache. Where are the wise? Where are those who lead not for fame, but for truth? Not for power, but for service? The truth is, many of them are hiding. Not out of cowardice, but out of disgust, out of disillusionment, out of exhaustion. We've built a system where wisdom is mocked, silence is interpreted as weakness, and those who dare to say, "I don't know," are crushed by those who pretend to know everything. But maybe it's time to call them back. Maybe it's time to create a space where the best among us want to lead, not out of ego, but out of purpose. Plato believed that education was the key. Not just technical skills or information, but the education of the soul. A deep cultivation of character, of values, of the ability to see beyond oneself. He believed that the city would never be just until the rulers became philosophers, or philosophers became rulers. And while we may never have philosopher kings, we can cultivate philosophical citizens. People who question, who think, who don't just follow the crowd. People who ask not just who is in charge, but should they be. People who understand that real leadership is not about dominance, but about discernment, not about control, but about clarity, and that sometimes the wisest leader is the one who steps forward not because they want to, but because they must, because the storm is rising, and someone has to take the wheel. But this raises one final haunting question. What if we've grown so addicted to the spectacle that we can no longer recognize wisdom when we see it? What if a philosopher were to walk among us today, modest, uncertain, thoughtful? Would we even listen? Or would we scroll past them, eyes glued to the next viral video, the next shouting head, the next promise of quick solutions? The crisis of leadership, then, is not just a crisis of who leads. It's a crisis of what we value, until we value wisdom more than entertainment, depth more than speed, and truth more than comfort. We will continue to choose the wrong captains. And the storm will rage on. But perhaps, just perhaps, if enough of us begin to hunger for something deeper, we will begin to see differently. We will begin to listen differently. And when the next quiet, thoughtful soul steps up, not to rule, but to serve, we will recognize them. Not because they shouted the loudest, but because they saw the stars and knew the way. If this video made you think, feel, or question, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments below. I truly appreciate you spending your time here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.